most recently Germany, as we've been reporting today, because of some concerns about blood clots in a tiny minority of people who've had the jab. Now, the think tank, the British Foreign Policy Group, has warned that countries like Russia and China could use the vaccine as a unique opportunity to increase their global influence. Sophia Gaston is director of the think tank. Hello to you. Thank you very much for talking to us. Why have you put it in these terms? Why is it a warning?
Well, I think one of the most fascinating aspects of the pandemic has been this has been a crisis of competition around scarce resources. From the very beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have the supply chains in place. We didn't have the PPE equipment that we needed, the ventilators and so on. And obviously, as we've moved through the pandemic, that frame of scarce resources has continued. And obviously now the most valuable commodity that everyone's trying to get their hands on is the vaccine. And one thing that we have seen consistently throughout the pandemic is countries like China and Russia, who are strategic rivals, they're systemic challengers, they have really cottoned on to the opportunity to leverage the pandemic, not only in terms of developing new relationships, but also in terms of advancing their soft power and their reputation around the world. They know everyone's in crisis, and in these moments of crisis, there are opportunities to influence that might not be there to them before. And so
what's wrong with that?
Sorry?
What's wrong with that?
Well, I think it's palpably not in the interests of Western nations and the Liberal Alliance more generally to have a situation where autocratic states that do not share our interests nor our values are able to make inroads at a time of real desperation. And it's not just about the fact that Russia and China are able to influence. It's the fact that Western and liberal alliances and institutions are not showing that they're delivering to citizens. And I think at a time when, the liberal alliance has been under quite a lot of strain, many advanced democracies, including our own, have been in a pretty difficult situation over the past 5 or 10 years. I think the fact that when you have a crisis, if these institutions aren't able to be sort of standing up and delivering for real people, then that's a crisis of legitimacy that could have long-term consequences.
The Liberal Alliance need to vaccinate their populations. That is liberal democracies standing up for their people. And then it doesn't matter where the vaccine comes from, as long as their people are safe.
Yes, I mean, look, there's no easy choices here. It's a scarce resource. And if we are sending more vaccines out to the developing world, then we're obviously going to be delaying our capacity to vaccinate our entire populations. And so it's really just about striking a balance. The UK has invested heavily in COVAX, which is a kind of global scheme. We've tried to get others involved in that as well, which will be looking to supply vaccines to the developing world. But it's not going to be enough. The problem is this is a crisis that is going to be playing out over years to come. And the reality is that none of us will be safe until everyone is safe. And so we have to, at the same time as obviously looking after our own citizens, we also have to be looking at the bigger picture here of the long-term geopolitical implications of, liberal nations, liberal alliances, liberal institutions not being the ones at the front of the queue that are seen to be delivering for people around the world more generally in a crisis.
Sure. I wonder if it could be a good thing, though, if deals are done with Germany and France and Russia. Yes, that means Russia has this sort of soft power influence, but also Germany and France could influence Russia in the future if they've got negotiations like this going on over something so crucial. Doesn't it work both ways?
Well, I mean, it's absolutely true that the fact that the West has not really been able to step up in delivering to the developing world, it has created an opportunity for us to vaccinate our own citizens. I mean, all of this, there is a zero-sum element to it to some degree. These countries stepping in has saved us the burden of doing that. but it's also a huge opportunity cost. You know, we have to think in the longer term when people are going to be thinking about, well, who are our friends in a time of need? If Russia and China are the ones at the door, that's not going to be in our interests. Because if you think about the developing world is obviously, you know, in many countries, they're in quite a nascent stage in thinking about their sort of international trading relationships, their infrastructure, who's going to build their communications technologies, who's going to be the influence for their governance and regulatory frameworks. If we are not there doing that, helping to influence that and making sure those things are built on the principle of openness, what's quite clear is that Russia and China are happy to step in and fill that vacuum. And I don't think that's in our long-term interests.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Sophia Gaston, Director of the British Foreign Policy think tank.